part of what I see now as the overly biological way of looking at the field has another consequence, and that is that a lot of our theories about how addiction develops, about what addiction is, how it should be treated, are very much based on expert judgments or expert opinions. And actually the real experts are the people who have it. You could call it a phenomenological view of addiction, that the essence of addiction is the habit that people are developing, the way in which they then view that habit as something that is getting them into trouble, but which they find it very difficult to control.
Not all psychologists see it quite like Jim. Some take what I tend to think of as a more cognitive approach, where the focus is on beliefs, patterns of thinking and language. Jane Ogden is a psychologist at the University of Surrey.
Well, I think central to the notion of addiction is feeling out of control, but also not being responsible for your behaviour. So it's a very useful construct if people want to say, I'm addicted to nicotine because there's nothing I can do about it, and the substance itself has got into my brain and made me addicted to it, which sort of lets people off the hook from their own behaviours or from a sense of personal responsibility for what they do. And I suppose with food, that's also quite useful for people as individuals to hold on to an addiction model, because they can say, I overeat because I'm addicted to chocolate, I'm addicted to sugar. And that gives people a model of their behaviour in which they aren't responsible. And although that's positive in some ways because they don't have to experience the blame, they then actually become victims of some kind of biological process over which they have no control. And I don't think psychologically it's good for us to be victims of anything, because once we become a victim of something, whether it's our brain chemicals, our neurotransmitters, or just the notion of an addiction, then we give up and we stop trying to change it.
I'd like to ask you what you would say to those people who are overeating. To them, this is an addiction. They can't control it. People who are extremely distressed at the end of their tether and at the same time suffering these massive physical harms, not just psychological, because of the obesity.
I mean, from a psychological perspective, all symptoms that we feel are percepts that we experience. They're not sensations which are given to us. They are perceptions that we make sense of, and then we conceptualise, and then we tell ourselves narratives about them. And the addiction world has given us a very strong narrative which says you are out of control of that because things in your brain are wanting more sugar or more chocolate or more whatever it is that you want. But that's just a narrative. So you could still experience that feeling and give it a different narrative. You know, your idea of being hungry or really, really hungry or desperate, I don't know whether they are actually qualitatively different to each other or whether they're different to what I experience, but it's just a way of framing and experiencing what's going on at that time. So for the person who sat there in front of a plate of food, they still have to make choices about how much that food goes in.
And this is the difficulty, isn't it? That you have to sit down and eat 3 times a day. So the thing you have the most trouble with confronts you.
And for something like smoking, you can go into complete abstinence, or for alcoholism, you can go into complete abstinence, and then you're not actually being confronted with the problematic behaviour on a regular basis. But for eating behaviour, we do all have to eat. So you're always in a kind of paradox of trying to control something, but still do it at the same time.
Words like narrative and percepts may seem pretty inadequate to describe the horror of living with an addiction, food or otherwise. But however uncomfortable these ideas may make some of us feel, to those involved in the field of cognitive psychology, this approach is uncontroversial and convincing. But in my experience, the idea that those with addiction see themselves as victims is one which most addicts themselves would vehemently disagree with.
I didn't have the power of choice. It was like almost a dual personality thing. So I would walk to the kitchen and open the fridge, and in my mind there would be a sane Louise watching me, saying, you know, you don't want to do this. But the voice saying, yes, you do, this will make you feel better, this is what you need, it'll be okay, you're not going to have any tomorrow. And I think that's why people find it so difficult to recover from compulsive overeating, is that it seems to be a choice. It seems to be, I'm making the choice, I'm standing up, I'm walking to the kitchen, I'm opening the fridge, I'm getting the food out, I'm putting it in my mouth, and I'm doing that.
Paradoxically, of course, by facing up to her inability to exert choice, Louise has actually found a way to recover. We've heard evidence from many sides about brain areas, habits, the role of choice, narratives about food and eating, and concepts of control. There appears to be a long way to go, but the will to discover more seems to be there. Even without a full picture of what's going on, we do know that there are effective treatments for addiction, and some of these are being used successfully to treat food addiction. An organisation called Overeaters Anonymous, or OA, has adapted the 12-step model used by Alcoholics Anonymous with much success. Both Louise and Michael are members. It's a self-help group, but its principles are also used in more formal treatment centres.
Oh wow, it's fantastic.
This is the garden for Hope House, which our clients can use.
Complete oasis in the middle of London, isn't it? Apart from the plains.
Hope House in South London is a treatment centre for women that uses the 12-step model to treat not only addiction to drugs and alcohol, but also food addiction.
My name is Nicola Schlesinger, and I work at Hope House, which is part of Action on Addiction, women's rehab for women with problems with alcohol, drugs, and quite commonly eating disorders as well. And here I work at my capacity as an addiction counsellor. Here we work with everything. We have a separate group for people with eating disorders, which is called the food group, and that's a separate group because obviously we are looking at something slightly differently. I mean, this is a 12-step program at Hope House, and there is 12-step for eating disorders, and some of the women go to meetings, and there's a structure that they follow. And actually with eating, it often can be quite practical where they're given eating plans or they're expected to follow an eating plan.
Our basic abstinence is 3 meals a day, nothing in between, which was in itself fascinating because I had been eating constantly from when I woke up to when I went to sleep, and sometimes I'd even wake up in the night and eat.
The 12-step programme, the first step is to admit that you've lost control,
yes,
isn't it?
Exactly, it is. It's powerlessness, and that is the sort of the crucial word for the first step.
Today, I completely accept that I am powerless over food, that actually I cannot make normal, healthy decisions about food in the way that other people can, and I just eat what's on my food plan. I don't eat anything else. If I have any issues, if there's a particular food that's on my plan that I can't get, then I don't make a decision about that. I call somebody up. And the extraordinary thing for me is that the compulsive thinking about food has just gone.
Do you think that the women who come to Hope House find it helpful to think about their eating problems within an addiction framework?
Yes, I think they do. Some of them realise, I'd like them all to realise it, that there's actually a big link, and that, we call it dual addiction, in fact, and that it's very important that they try and make some progress with their food difficulties. Obviously, they have to abstain from their other substances while they're with us, and that's called being in recovery, but they also need to try and help themselves with their food, because I have noticed, I think, a greater level of relapse of people that have both an eating addiction and another addiction. They're more likely to relapse, particularly if they haven't allowed themselves, or they're too scared for whatever. It takes a lot of work to do this, a lot of courage as well, to attempt to try and modify their eating at the same time. So how I see it, the idea is that actually in the end, hopefully, that you can take control of the food rather than the food controlling you.